What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. It is Wednesday, June 28th. My name is Euan, and on today's episode, we will be getting into some F1 fantasy with an Austrian Grand Prix preview. Before we get started, just wanted to say we'd really appreciate any likes or subscribes to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Euan or Euout, where I'll be talking about the race all weekend once it gets started on Friday, sprint weekend in Austria. So lots to talk about. But yeah, like, subscribe, really appreciate it. And let's get on with the episode. Just wanted to give a quick rundown about what we'll be getting into in this week's episode. So quick Canadian Grand Prix preview or review, fantasy standings, driver of the week, price changes, which were wild this past week or 2 weeks ago. Then we'll get into the Austrian Grand Prix preview with some schedule, weather, talk about chips. Lots of people talk about playing chips this week, so that'll be interesting. The DRS Boost discussion, if we are playing a chip, potentially the extra DRS Boost, some transfers to consider, and then the upcoming races. There will be timestamps for all of these in the episode description below. So just feel free to jump around and just watch what you want. So here we go. Canadian Grand Prix results. It was quite wet in Montreal a couple of weekends ago, but Max Verstappen came out on pole in qualifying with a great lap in Q3, and he kind of stormed away with the race. There was some chicanery here with Nico Hülkenberg coming second after the rain was just too heavy. But he got a 5-place grid penalty with and that kind of knocked him down the standings, and he wasn't able to recover there. Alex Albon had a great Q2 run in the slicks when it was getting wet and no one else could get it right, so he found himself in Q3, and he topped it off with an excellent Sunday. But the podium rounded out as Max, Fernando, and Lewis, with the Ferraris having a pretty strong day as they brought some upgrades, as did Aston Martin. So pretty good overall for the top 4 teams, which does enable us to maybe begin to think about using a different type of chip this weekend, which I will get into shortly. George Russell had a DNF after he crashed into the wall. Car couldn't recover. I think he got back out on the road, but eventually they had to retire the car, and Logan Sargent had a critical braking failure or something quite early in the race. So not good news for the American there. Going over to some facts and stats, the optimal team here looks pretty similar to what we're used to. Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Stroll, but Alex Albon with a great day there, rounding out the team at 283 points. Positions gained. I have not updated this since the controversy about Lance Stroll. So he actually ended up getting 5 overtakes in the F1 game after there were some protests from the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord. I know they did a great job contacting the F1 customer support and kind of getting people to pay attention to the fantasy game that they are producing. So great job by them. That is going to be Stroll up there with 5 overtakes as well, along with Gasly. And fastest pit stop dominated by Red Bull once again. Driver fantasy points. Actually, just want to go back to this picture real quick. Just Nico Hülkenberg being on the top 3 steps on a qualifying was great to see. Driver fantasy points here. Not a lot is changing in terms of the season average. Verstappen on top, Perez, Alonso, Hamilton. George Russell taking a -12. Hurts him quite a bit there. Charles Leclerc slowly but surely climbing back up the ranks, averaging 16 points per race over his last 3. Lance Stroll still recovering from that Monaco DNF, but 14 points in Canada was encouraging to see for him as well. Zhou Guanyu, not the best race for him, but Alexander Albon all the way down there at 22 points. Great race for him. He was driver of the day. I'm going to talk about him in just a little bit as well, a little bit more in depth. Yuki Tsunoda there with 8 points. Him and Joe. The price changes, super weird. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So a lot of people struggling to understand what that is. No official kind of announcement about where they are getting those prices from in the game. I found about as close of a correlation as I could find with one metric, but we will see if that continues moving forward. Constructor points, Mercedes coming on strong here with almost 47 points per race in their last 3, kind of outpacing Aston Martin and Ferrari over the season now that their upgrades are in, and they just have a more consistent car than Ferrari and Aston Martin do, and more consistent drivers probably. They probably have the strongest driver pairing on the grid, even ahead of Red Bull with Perez and Verstappen, just with Hamilton and Russell's combined talent, at least in my opinion. And yeah, they're just kind of, their car plus their talent is kind of shining through as the season wears on. So we'll have to see if that is going to continue, if Mercedes can make more leaps and bounds. And it's another reason that we might play a different chip than the extra DRS boost this weekend. Over to driver of the week here, Alexander the Great. Qualified 10th after a great Q2 run, finished 7th. 22 fantasy points, which was his season high, and he's now the only driver below 7.5 million to score over 20 points in a race this year. Almost 8 million, but Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly have also done the 20-point mark. Driver price changes. I woke up on Monday morning and it was crazy. Monday morning in Germany, because the race in Canada was a little bit later than usual. Absolutely wild times in Canada with all of these price changes fluctuating. Like, it was good to see Fernando Alonso finally kind of get priced appropriately, but there was a lot more going on here with Sergio Perez going up 0.3. Like, before this season, we'd only gone up 0.1 or 0.2, but yeah, woke up Monday morning and it was all of this craziness over here. Carlos Sainz 0.3, Charles Leclerc 0.3, Pierre Gasly's up 500,000, Lance Stroll's up 500,000, Esteban Ocon's up 500,000, Yuki Tsunoda's up 500,000, Bottas up 500,000. It doesn't make any sense at all. Alexander Albon up 1 million after his great race, and there was only one faller, with George Russell going down 500,000 after his DNF kind of crash out in Montreal. As for the constructors, no one went down, but plenty of teams went up here. Aston Martin up 1 million, McLaren and Alpine up 1 million. Really interesting by the game to kind of just launch this on us halfway through the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after Austria, see if we can find a pattern with the price changes. But the only thing I could find, I kind of summarized it here. So they're old and they're new price with the change. So a lot more drastic than anything we've seen so far. So this is the first 7 guys, and then the next 6 are on the next page. The only thing I could find that was the points per million for Canada, which if you go on F1 Fantasy Tools, they have it race by race, really good resource there. That's where I get my numbers from for my spreadsheet. So shout out to them once again. And yeah, the points per million in Canada matched up with how big the price changes were. So like Alonso and Albon went up 1 million. Those were the top 2 guys in the points per million metric for Canada as well. George Russell was the only one that went down. He was the lowest points per million guy, considering he costs 18.7 million and he got a -12. The only thing that kind of threw that off was Logan Sargent didn't go down, but they might just be saying that 3.5 million is the baseline for a driver. Like, cannot go any lower than that, because pretty low already. And yeah, any lower would just be like kind of getting a free space, and you just hope he gets a 0 every weekend. But the American driver definitely needs to show some results sooner rather than later, especially because Alex Albon just had that great drive in Canada. He did have the upgrades while Sargent did not on the Williams, but I believe Sargent is going to get them in Austria this weekend. Over here, the last 6 guys, at least in the driver price changes, like Ocon went up, Gasly, like they had good races. Stroll went up as well. Albon, he had over 2 times his value in points, so he shot up 1 million. Bottas got 10th, so the points per million for each individual race seemed to kind of match up as best as I could see. But hopefully we get some clarification. We'll see a pattern after Austria, and we can figure this all out as a team and come back to it and kind of estimate where we're going for the rest of the season, because we're almost at the summer break. And this is the fourth last race before the summer break. So the Austrian Grand Prix preview here with some race info. Red Bull Ring, super fun track to play on the F1 game. Probably one of my favorites, to be honest. 71 laps, 10 corners, 3 DRS zones. Plenty of chances for overtakes if you have the faster car. But this weekend is going to be a sprint weekend like it was last year. It was a pretty good weekend for Ferrari, except for Mr. Carlos Sainz, whose car exploded while he was leading the race, I believe. It had to pull off. It was all on fire. Charles Leclerc overtook Max Verstappen when Ferrari was still kind of competing. I think things got a lot tougher for Ferrari after this race. I know Carlos Sainz won Silverstone, but then the back half of the year, yeah, that picture kind of sums it up. Ferrari were on fire, but it was a sprint weekend, so there's going to be lots of points this weekend in the F1 fantasy game as well. Here is the schedule for the weekend. So on Friday, we have free practice 1. This is the new schedule that they tested out or started to implement in Azerbaijan. So there's only one practice session. Then it's the Grand Prix qualifying on Friday afternoon. Saturday is fully dedicated to the sprint, and Sunday is the Grand Prix. So that means that our lineups are going to lock on Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. local time, 11 a.m. Eastern in the States, or 4 p.m. if you're in the UK. I think those are kind of the 3 main time zones to cover. We'll still get points for Saturday, no points for sprint qualifying. I checked the F1 site this morning. Still no points going out there, but yeah, only one practice session on Friday, and Fernando Alonso actually came out yesterday or earlier this week and said that that might not be good for Aston Martin because they still need to learn a lot about their upgrade package. So they may struggle with the lack of practice time this weekend. He still thinks the car will perform well, but he's not entirely sure if they'll get all the data they need with the new upgrades in just one practice session. Whereas Mercedes, who have had a couple of races now with their upgrade package, maybe it will be good for them. And it could be an interesting battle there. Sprint qualifying, we'll see if that kind of shakes anything up. But a lot of podcasts this week. I've been listening to The Race, Missed Apex. They've been talking about how the gap in Canada did close between the top 4 teams to Red Bull. Is the cost cap penalty starting to affect Red Bull's like distance over the field, or is Red Bull just concentrating on 2024 already because they know they've got both championships in the bag? Definitely something to think about. Once again, I got up a little early this morning to refresh the weather, and it's rain, go away once again. But it should not be there for the Grand Prix. I think Friday and Saturday are going to have early afternoon showers, so it shouldn't affect the qualifying, and it may not affect the sprint, but practice 1, which would be even worse for Aston if they have rain to kind of get data on, that's not going to be great for them either. So definitely not so sunny skies in Spielberg, Austria this weekend, but keep an eye on that, and I'm sure we'll get updated as the race gets closer. But yeah, as you can see, another potentially difficult weather weekend for our F1 fantasy lineups. Now into the chips discussion, and I brought this slide back from earlier in the year. I used it in the Australia Grand Prix preview, and I used it in my chip strategy podcast from way earlier in the year, which I'll update over the summer break as we try to get content. But I've seen a lot of people saying that extra DRS is the chip to play this weekend. As of right now, I am in full agreement, but there are some devil's advocates out there that are saying, why don't we save it for later in the year when Max has an engine penalty and has to start through the back of the field? And I laid it out here a couple of months ago that this is what Max did in Saudi Arabia when he qualified, and he didn't even make Q1. He finished second in that race. So as you see, he would have at least 21 more points or 24 more points with that extra DRS there in the 183. So that would bring him to 207. And then on a sprint weekend, if he does everything correctly, no hiccups, this is what he'll end up with this weekend with 204 points. So is it likely he's going to get driver of the day if he starts first? I don't know. I think the stat that came out last week was that no one has led a race in a lap in the Grand Prix since Miami with Sergio Perez. So Verstappen is on quite a streak, but is it kind of a Michael Jordan, LeBron James, like not appreciating his greatness, not giving him enough MVP kind of things here? And is he going to get driver of the day? So that would kind of hurt if he doesn't get that. That would be down another 30 points to 174. But I think with the extra DRS chip, this is potentially the last great time to kind of use it before maybe the field is catching up, as a lot of people have suggested. And Max is as sure of a thing as they come right now. And it's going to be, will it be a little bit more dangerous to use this chip later in the year when there's more uncertainty? Like right now, Max is as good of a bet as anything to win the sprint, qualify first, win the whole race, fastest lap, all that stuff. Red Bull Ring, knows it well. So that is where I'm leaning. But the other chip in consideration is the Limitless chip. And I just wanted to put together this. Font's a little small. Sorry about that. But the best Limitless lineup, according to the season average that we have right now, would get you 279.53 points, and it would cost you 152 million. So that's with the top 5 drivers and the 2 best constructors just averaged out. Carlos Sainz, 15.88. George Russell's at like 14.83 after his DNF. So he would fit in there, and the team would cost a little bit more than that. But then here's the meta team that we can have this weekend: Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Stroll, Tsunoda, or Zhou Guanyu, doesn't really matter. And that's only going to cost 106.2 million, which a lot of people have after all those price jumps. And that would cost, or that would get us 247.53 points on average. So I feel like the Limitless chip can be used in a better way later in the season. That's only gaining us like 32-ish points. I feel like, yeah, later in the year when maybe Mercedes have got a handle on their upgrades, maybe Aston Martin is better, Ferrari's calmed down the reliability, we can maybe get more juice out of the orange with the Limitless chip. But I have seen people saying that it could be a good time to use it, kind of zig while people zag. But for me, I'm going to wait on the Limitless chip until these other top 4 teams, maybe even like an Alpine, look a lot stronger, and we can kind of clarify who is going to be like, it doesn't feel for certain we know the 6 best or the 7 best assets this weekend in Austria, and we have at least 4 more sprints to kind of figure this out. So Limitless chip on a sprint weekend for sure. If you want to go for this weekend, like, you'll gain probably some points on the field. You'll lose some if the rest of us use our extra DRS, but it is an option this weekend. I think there's just going to be stronger options later on in the season for us to use that chip. So if we use the extra DRS boost, who are we going to put our regular DRS boost on? And it's between Alonso and Perez. We've all got them mostly. I've seen some people that got Perez out for Sainz or Leclerc or Russell last weekend, but I think it just kind of comes down to the heart says Alonso because he's a better story. He's out driving his car, whereas Perez is underperforming. But at the end of the day, Perez has more points. He's right there in last 3 points per race, and he has that kind of ceiling that we saw in Azerbaijan with 61 points. Alonso had 39 in the first race of the year, and he hasn't cracked 30 since. So I think the numbers just tell us to go with Perez, and that will be that. Kind of boring. I'll be cheering on Alonso more than Perez, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to get as many points as possible. So I think I'll be putting my DRS boost on Sergio. Final preview thing here is just my team. This is where I'm at. I got 3 transfers available. I went back to the meta in Canada after in Monaco. I went with Pierre and Nico, and that did not go well. So played it boring, and I got lucky with the random price jumps all over the place. And I think it's a good idea to probably stick with that this weekend, just to play it safe, figure out what these new price jumps are going to be like, where we're going with this, trying to see what they're trying to target. But there are a couple of options. If I want to be aggressive, Stroll to Gasly, Tsunoda to Joe would be an option. If I just want to blow it all up, Perez to Hamilton, Stroll to Hulkenberg, Tsunoda to Sargent, would not suggest that one. But I think option A is going to be where I'm going. I think that is the best way for us to kind of lean right now, go back towards the meta, Tsunoda or Joe, whoever you're feeling a little bit more there. Overtakes, points gained. There'll be plenty of overtakes in Austria, so it could work out quite well for those back markers as long as they qualify low. So we'll see. But yeah, this is kind of with the new prices. It's going to be it's kind of like, whoa, like wait and see where we're at with the what happens after Austria. So I think we'll just, for me, sticking with the meta is just going to play it safe, and maybe that will give us more options moving forward. That will kind of, yeah, not super exciting, but probably the best way, because if you go aggressive and then we get priced out of like, even like we all got priced, most of us got priced out of like Alexander Albon this last weekend. Like if Tsunoda goes up and then you only have Joe, you're just going to have to hope that Joe catches up to Tsunoda at some point. Or so kind of like you don't want to get priced out of Stroll randomly, like if Sergio DNFs, and I don't know, just a whole thing. So until we have more info about these price changes, I think going with the meta is probably the sensible thing. Upcoming races, there is the British Grand Prix next weekend. I am on vacation next week, so I will not have a preview video for that, but then I will be back for the final double header before the summer break with the Hungarian Grand Prix, and then we have a sprint weekend to wrap up the first half, I guess you could say, with a sprint weekend in Belgium. And then it's the summer break where we are going to be off. I'll probably update best of the back markers, look at some chip strategy again, kind of just review the ebbs and flows of the first part of the season, but definitely some videos coming out over the summer break. And if you want to know when those come out, like and subscribe to the channel. That would be really appreciated by me. But yeah, that's our schedule. 3 races left until the upcoming break, but we got a double header this weekend with the Austrian Grand Prix and then the British Grand Prix next weekend, then another break, and then it's almost summer. So have fun with that. But hopefully this has been a long episode of just looking at the timer right now. So hopefully the timestamps have helped. Jump around, kind of figure out what it is. But yeah, I'll be playing my extra DRS boost probably on Max Verstappen, unless this weather is just getting worse over the weekend in Austria. But don't forget to like and subscribe to the video and the channel. Really appreciate it. And once again, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.